Hi, everyone. This is Ben with MeasureQuick. And today I have with me Paul McHugh of Rayo Cook, a contractor in California. So, hey, Paul, thanks for being here.
Good morning.
We're going to continue on the theme of talking about commissioning, talking about equipment that is failing before it's supposed to fail, some equipment failing immediately after it's being installed. So recently we did a interview with Jim Bergman and Bill Spohn regarding Bill's new heat pump that he had installed on his forever home that had to be scrapped due to moisture being inside of the system because it wasn't evacuated properly. And that is because it was never commissioned. And so Paul McHugh here is an expert in commissioning, I would say. One of the top examples of a contractor using MeasureQuick that really has great processes for commissioning. I did an interview with him last year. We'll link that video as well, where we talked about the commissioning and startup process that Rail Cook has adopted and adheres to quite closely. But with the fact that incentive programs for more efficient, more sensitive equipment are starting to roll out, and a lot of consumers being told to upgrade their equipment to get higher efficiency, to get energy savings. One of the challenges is that many contractors don't understand just how much more complex and sensitive these pieces of equipment are to certain operational conditions that previously in years past with systems, let's say that have R422 or R410A refrigerant, they were a lot less sensitive to these small inconsistencies in the way that they were installed. And Paul, I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit on what you just experienced recently regarding a couple pieces of equipment that were failing and how you went through a process to do a postmortem and gather a whole bunch of data and carefully track this and interact with the manufacturer to try to figure out if this is a known issue or not, and all of it using MeasureQuick and your very thorough commissioning process.
We have a process and a procedure that we always purge nitrogen when we braze. We use the Blue Vac app. We try and get south of 500 microns, many times 300. Before that, we are going to pressurize with nitrogen. We run the pipe wiper. If we ever use existing lines, we run the pipe wiper until we don't get any oil. Things and processes that really don't take that much longer, but ensure a predictable outcome a very high amount of the time. So that scenario is done on every one of our jobs. And what we experienced was an installation that was done, an inverter product with a TXV, non-EEV, that probably about 2 months old. And at the time of installation, it did pass Title 24. It had about 9 degrees of subkilling, which was within target. And we had a very hot July here in California, and the thing cooled perfectly fine through July. In fact, we had record temperatures in July, and it was maintaining set point and working perfectly fine throughout that first month of operation. August came through and we scheduled the commissioning, and we commission with our commissioning specialists usually 1 month of the year for cooling. And it's usually in our shoulder seasons when it's still warm enough to get a good load on the house, but we're winding down off a peak load service call stuff. And it got scheduled, and the commissioning specialist went out, and we had some issues with superheat. In fact, we had lost most of our subcooling as well. So we have some processes and procedures before we condemn a valve, a TXV, to try and get that valve to hunt and to actually get it to do something, to get it to move. And pretty much it would not move. If we use existing line, we're going to wait a charge in. And we just use the manufacturer's charging chart. Most of them are 0.6 per foot, 0.6 ounces per foot. And we can get pretty close. So we know the charge is weighed in because we have a picture from the install technician of the scale for what the new system engineer that sold the job said to add before we opened the valves. So we know we had to be pretty close on charge. Basically, when we get into the commissioning process, the red flag was thrown, and we went down the process of trying to get that valve to hunt and to work, and it was not. The call went out to the manufacturer, to the distributor. We got to go through the chain to get our free valves. And when we talked to that particular manufacturer, it was literally a 5-minute conversation. It's normally check this, call me back, but those numbers were already recorded through the commissioning process with the MeasureQuick form, and we had all that down. What we know is now we're on our we've seen the second one of these, and we're starting to see a pattern through our commissioning process. So the second one has not been replaced yet, but the first one, we had it bagged and tagged and brought back to the shop, and we cut it open to make and see if we had it. Because sometimes you can actually see the contamination of the junk in the valve. It was clean. All it had was oil in it. So that's not a telltale sign, but we know that our dryer was clean. We didn't have pressure drops there. The minute the valve was put in on the new one, we're A+ certified at 90 degrees outside. We got 9 degrees or 8 degrees subcooling. The unit's working perfectly fine. It is our best assumption that the valve failed somewhere between the time our install crew installed it and about 2 months after we commissioned it. We're seeing a pattern, same model, same manufacturer, 2 different technicians. So, everything is parallels we look at everything as this, oh, look at that. That it's got to be that because it's all the same.
Causal relationships, yeah.
Yep, exactly. The third one would have been a package inverter that was a EEV, same issue, about 3 months old. Again, past Title 24, warm day, plenty of load. Believe it, on that one, got an A- or an A on the MeasureQuick, but packaging, no charge issues. It came from the factory with the right amount of refrigerant. So we actually, before we went down the road on that, because we didn't have hands-on refrigerant, we actually recovered all the Freon out of it, the 410A, and we weighed the charge back in just to be sure, because we just knew when we called manufacturer customer support, they were probably going to ask for that because we've been down that road before. So we already headed that one out at the pass, off at the pass. Anyway, an EEV scenario, not a mechanical failure. The stepper motor and the harness, which gets repaired or replaced as a whole with this manufacturer, we had problems with the electronic side of it. And that's another one, zero subcool or superheat. And that stepper motor was not the board. It was not something sending a signal. It was not the algorithms in the board and problems with the logic. It was just flat. The motor was bad. And we're talking a 3-month-old unit. And it happens. And again, things happen. But again, another one that we, for sure, with no superheat, it's just not a matter of if, it's when. Got a new harness, put it back in, everything's fine. We'll monitor it. Now, if we get another issue with that, we're going to know we got problems with this manufacturer with their harnesses and their stepper motors, their electronics, and we will scream very loud that we are seeing patterns. You need to fix this. And they will probably take that as a case study, because this particular manufacturer, every time you call them with a particular problem, they have a case number, and we have the case number. And if we say something like, here's 5 case numbers, same problems, what's going on? Then there's data, there's history.
And you have the MeasureQuick reports that come with all of them.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that backs it up.
And so using MeasureQuick reports as an advantage when having conversations with manufacturers.
Yeah.
Because I've had a bunch of our customers talk about how they just started doing that and how it saved them so much headaches. The manufacturer would go from this long, arduous process to being 5-minute conversations now where it's just, oh, you've got receipts. So like navigating warranty calls with MeasureQuick, what's that like for you?
We live in an industry where really the manufacturer told you to do that? No, we're not doing that. I'm sorry to be that guy, but you know the commercial where you open the door and it's just a desert into the front yard after you bought something? The warranty. We feel sometimes in the industry that you bought it. Here's all the reasons why you should buy our product, and the technical support is way less than the motivation to sell it to you. And we have a serious issue with that. We are this close with 2 or 3 of our manufacturers that we sell to go down the road of, you guys got to learn how to stream data from our technician on a warranty call. We are more than willing to set this call up in our schedule, spend our labor on your piece of equipment that's not working, and welcome with open arms that you tell us it's something we did so we can fix it. We want that. But if it's not something we did, tell us what you're going to do to fix your product and use the data. Don't send us PDFs, form filler PDFs that we have to write all this stuff down, long form. Come on. And we're really close there on that. We're getting some pushback, but why are we multi-billion-dollar companies? Why are we filling out manual forms on a warranty call to have an area territorial troubleshooter to take 2 weeks to read the form and call us back with it? It's crazy. It's crazy. So where are we at on that? The reception has been lukewarm because it's different. It's different. And it's been lukewarm at best, but it's just like anything else. I believe once they get it and they use it and they're able to make their job easier, because this is all this is about. When you look at a troubleshooter for a local distributor that has to go to the field and the technician, that's just time. That's time for him. That's a cost to them. That's his job. But for those that he doesn't have to do that on, there's more that he can go do that on that he really has to go to the field. That's really the push. We're not in the business of making other people's jobs easier, but if I can make their job easier and in the same point save Rayo Cook money doing it's a win. Yeah, it's a win.
Because it saves you time, saves you money, saves you headache, and then just so happens to also make them better at the same time.
Yep. And that's, we have some, when you get into the DDC controls, the inverter communicating scenarios, what's running on that are on the ones that we have sold on that and had some issues where we need to talk to customer support. They're not even asking to log on to that platform. They're asking us to fill in manual stuff as if it's a 14-SEER torque motor, builder grade. And there's a lot of, this is the way we used to do it. This is the way we do it. By God, if you want your warranty part, this is what you got to do. And that's, we're pushing to break out of that, but that's going to be a process.
Do you ever send MeasureQuick reports to the manufacturers?
Yep.
And
absolutely.
how is that received?
What's this? This is cool.
But then after this is cool, does it help you selfishly?
It looks like you guys got it.
It just looks fancy enough that they trust it, which that's unfortunate, but like also it helps you a little bit, but they miss the point, but it's a good outcome.
Exactly. It is what it is. So
okay.
The gap, to be honest with you, one of these TXVs that were failing, I was at a call getting ready to go in to see a homeowner, and I said, stream me the data, because they called. I got a call from a technician because our service manager was out. We have people for that, but I'll do it. And I said, I'm like, stream me the data. And I'm like, I want to check out this new grid thing, this grid view. And bam, I'm like, yeah, you got to know, do this, do that. And I'm literally in real time watching the superheat not change as we're sucking 121 degrees out of the attic through the blower compartment, which if that's
from
not going to
30 miles away.
Yeah, or 40. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to tell you, you got to call this manufacturer, local rep, and he's going to tell you to call the manufacturer, but have these readings ready. Have them ready. And it was, like I said, it's a 5-minute conversation, and they didn't even want us to. The way that normally goes is, what's this? What's that? And if you can't answer, it's like getting pulled over. If you can't, when you're driving, if you can't answer these coherent questions, it might be you're intoxicated. Get out of the car. And with the manufacturer, it's more, go ahead and fill out this form, and I'll look at it, and I'll call you back. But if you've got the right answers, you don't have to fill out the form.
But it's a sniff test to see if they're competent or not.
That is all it is. That is true. That is what it is. And we don't want to be calling manufacturers. We really don't. But we're in a world where we got to, if we want a warranty part, we got to get their blessing. You got to get a case number.
The machinery that exists.
You got to follow the process, and that is what it is. Follow them, but boy, we can sure do it easier. When you do the same unit over and over again, you use the same brand, you see a lot of parallels and patterns. And what we saw jokingly in our industry, that it's never the TXV. It's always airflow. It's always a dirty filter. Replace the TXV, condemn the TXV. In this instance, it was the TXV. TXVs do fail. EEVs do fail. It has to be diagnosed correctly. But when we look at what took place here and what was headed off at the pass, it can become sobering when you look at what would happen if that compressor was left with zero superheat. And it's not a matter of if, it's when. And that when is coming. I'm not going to predict when, but it was coming. It always comes in the middle of July when it's 106. The customer, this particular customer, we did his son's house, 2 units, great people. And now we have no cooling. We're ordering a compressor that's probably not in stock in Sacramento. The customer's sitting there with no air conditioning. The anger line goes up and the frustration line goes up. We've got a technician that's got a lot of time to diagnose that bad compressor. That is a warranty call. We've got to have a purchasing agent order it when she could be ordering parts for paid service. We've got to send a tech back, minimum of 3 to 4 hours with travel. And when you look at what the average ticket is on a peak load month, that's all lost revenue. And that's, you got to take care of the customer too. The last thing we can say to that customer is, wait till fall, we'll get to you. And there are companies that do that, sadly, but we're not one of them. So when you look at the lost revenue, it can be substantial. Do what's right for the customer, head off what's coming, change the valve, and go on with life. And because the fact is, you're going to do something with that unit. It's just a matter of not if, it's when. So that's one we saved.
If I was to play devil's advocate, is that not an edge case where why should anybody be caring about that? The amount of worry that you're putting in, yes, you have the data and you have the confidence in the data, but most other companies, they have too many other priorities on their plate. And so this type of approach of paying attention to those anomalies and then tracking them, like it is, you are not a typical contractor. And so connecting the dots between Rayo Cook's process and let's say the rest of the market, the callback costs make sense. Like the fact that it is a lot of lost revenue. People with enough reasoning to understand their books, they would know that callbacks are very expensive. But for most contractors, it just seems like too much complexity to wrap their heads around. So it's not worth my time to try to add all of this additional process to just catch some of those edge cases. Is there a simple way that other contractors would be able to relate to the problem, or rather the scenario that you faced here?
The process and procedure and the culture is the more important word, is not there just to do things because it's cool to do and we can show people we do these cool things. It's actually to help the customer. We help the customer. And how do we help the customer? We save them grief of not having any air conditioning. We saved them having to deal with taking time off work for us to come back to repair a system that they actually spent thousands of dollars with us that now does not work. The easy button here is to have some type of conversation with yourself, if you will, about what culture you want in your company. And that's a tough one. I get it. I compete against it every day. I understand that. But when we let for instance, and we're in our marketplace, Title 24 or building code be the standard, we're going to pay for that in many instances with this new equipment. And when I say this new equipment, is this higher end inverter driven stuff that you just can't allow a $25 or how many dollar an hour install technician that wants to get home to his wife, his kids, his dogs, and his cats after being in the attic for 8 hours at 100 degrees. He does not have and should not be taxed with the goal of dialing the unit in. That is just, I've tried it. We've tried it here at Rayo Cook, and that's just one thing I can offer is consider, and I hate the word giving, but giving your technicians that work their butt off during the summer for you and do a good job for you, give them the commissioning hours to gain good quality installations that will pay dividends over the time that the customer owns the unit. And we leverage that commissioning to keep good technicians so that we have the hours. Let's face it, when we do 2 maintenance agreements a year, visits, that's a loss leader. That's a subject for another day, but that's to be in front of the customer with a good technician, the relationship, the camaraderie that the technician has with Mrs. Smith on your air conditioner is good, or we need to do this or that. Commissioning needs to be looked at that way. It's just an automatic process that if you implement, let's do the math, a 4-hour replacement in the middle of July, if you were in our area, and we're not a high price company, we're not, we're in the middle, maybe north of 5 on the scale, but we're not high price. Value, we're good. If a technician's billing $200 an hour in the middle of July, so 200 times 4, there's $800 that he would have generated if he had those 4 hours to talk to a customer that has no air conditioning, that's a new customer of ours. When you get into the new customer acquisition fee that you lose, that he cannot run that call, that goes up. We got to wait for our money sometimes when we do a warranty claim from the manufacturer for the refrigerant and things that we would do on that compressor. It's only a negative thing. It always happens in the time that you don't want it to happen, but it happens in the peak load season when you want nothing negative. You actually shouldn't allow anything negative that you can not allow, because that's just revenue to the bottom line. And so is there an easy button? All I can say is consider, to a lot of these companies that don't do this, consider getting away from the process of, if we at least do this and this, we're okay. And when you get down to that okay, if you don't do this, you just fell below okay. So when you set that bar low and you fail on one of those 3 items to be okay, you now got below okay, and it's going to get
contingency. Yep.
That there's no safety net. There's no, you're going to be either choosing not to go to that customer on peak load service hour time, which is, you can get into the ethics of that, but now you're forced to make choices that you just don't want to. You want to choose on how many technicians you want to hire to generate revenue. Not should I run this warranty call, or should I put them off? And those are questions that ethically you get into, you just don't want to have to make.
It's interesting how we talked at the beginning about how new equipment isn't nearly as forgiving. Talking about contingency, technicians, HVAC companies had contingency in the old pieces of equipment because the manufacturers would actually engineer into the equipment all of this extra either capacity or the ability to deal with a bad installation. And that was one of the reasons why they weren't so efficient. But like all of that contingency that the market has been conditioned to believe, is all of that's out the window now because of all of these decisions that the manufacturers had to make. Some of them their own decisions, some of them decisions that were forced upon them to change the equipment to need this like very narrow performance band, like we talked about in our previous conversation as well.
Yeah, there's nothing built into this equipment. And again, it to be fair, it does force you, or allows you to choose or not to do a load on the house and have an accurate heat loss gain calculation and know what the performance of the system and matchup of whatever you're selling. For years with R22, got colder quicker, beer can cold, satisfied the thermostat, everybody's happy. Dump the liquid freon into the valves before you open them, and once liquid come out the other end, shut it off. Those days are so gone that in the world we live in now, there has to be some type of process and procedure. It doesn't have to be perfect, but get it way above standard, because standard's very low.
Maybe just a little bit more on the ACCA certificates. How were you guys introduced to them, and why is it different than your normal MeasureQuick process? How do you sell it? And then what changes in the way that you do your work with MeasureQuick once you do the ACCA? Yeah,
and that's going to be when you look at a workflow with regards to VEO or any type of commissioning, the juice has got to be worth the squeeze to the customer. And how you do that is, and how we do it is at point of estimate, we will talk to the customer about the differences between what an ACCA VEO certification is and a non-ACCA VEO certification. And it's very simple, is we can do this job to a 70% or better, but 70% is the threshold that we're trying to hit, or we can get you north of 95%. Which would you prefer? And always it's, oh, we want 95. Okay, this is what we do differently to get you there. Because most of our competitors, if they're not talking about this certificate that's independent and third party, if they're not talking about that, you're not getting it. You're getting building code. And this unit at building code will cool your house. It will heat your house. It's what's happening behind the scenes, behind the thermostat, that is going to be good or bad long term for the mechanical device that you're buying. So a building code standard unit is not going to hurt you today. It's not going to hurt you next week. It's not going to hurt you maybe in a year. But there is high potential it's going to have a problem much sooner than you'd like due to it not being dialed in, commissioned, which is what the VEO, the verified equipment operation, will do for you. And that's simple. An indoor fan motor now that fails, that's electronic, it can easily be north of $2,000. And if it does not have the right amount of airflow, or more importantly, it passes the state airflow test, it is a candidate for failure. Those are facts. Those are not opinions. Those are facts. So that part alone more than covers the cost of commissioning the unit. So you put it in context that the customer can understand. And again, they're going to believe you or they're not, but you got to try. As long as you try, a lot of people will have questions about that. And now you're talking about why you're better and why the other guy isn't. And again, at the end of that conversation, they may not see the value in it, and that's okay. But they got the spiel, they got the choice, and they made the decision. You didn't make it for them. And that's where we get in trouble in this industry, is making choices for customers. You got to exploit what the other guy does wrong and how you do it better. And that's the takeaway.
Juxtaposition, contrast. But with ACCA VEO,
yes,
when you guys discovered that it's available in MeasureQuick, but you were already doing like MeasureQuick almost religiously to some degree, like what changed when you were going from you're trying to get those vital scores up above AA plus?
Yes.
Now that you have the ACCA VEO, how is that different than what you were getting with a vital score?
Yes. So MeasureQuick is the play on words here. No offense, Shelby. Conduit to the VEO. MeasureQuick is the platform that is used to issue the certificate from ACCA, which is the standard writer in our industry. In fact, a lot of the times we have our guys now, and I have my guys that sell in the house. If you talk to somebody that does not know who Air Conditioning Contractors of America is and is selling you a piece of equipment, you might want to reconsider who you're buying from, because they write the standard on everything in our industry. Now, whether it's followed or not becomes a choice, but we tie it back to the ACCA, everything, Manual J, Manual D, all of that stuff that provides a predictable result from the high dollar amount they're about ready to spend. That is all coming from ACCA. What's the conduit to Manual J and Manual D? ASHRAE. Okay, what's the conduit to this VEO certificate? MeasureQuick. So how we changed was, the verbiage was, you will get an independent certification from an online platform called MeasureQuick, and it's guaranteed to be an A or an A+. Okay, that will put you well within the top 95% of most systems in North America. Okay, bring it a little locally to California, you're not going to be at a C. You're going to be well above a C. You're going to be at an A or an A+. Okay, we just changed that verbiage to the ACCA VEO, the certificate They will not see the report in our Service Titan platform. They see the ACCA verified equipment operation. We might even laminate these and mail them to them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we send out thank you cards from the new system engineer that sold the equipment, and we're getting to a point where we might even send that with the thank you card. We hit target. Congratulations. But going forward is, how about we keep this at A+ rating? How do we do that? Maintenance. Some type of ongoing care. Because it's not going up over time. It can only go down. Why isn't it an A? When you have customers talking to your new system or new commissioning specialist, when they get there asking, all I want's an A, we're going to get an A, right? We're going to get an A, right? Then the new system engineer that sold the job, he did his job on the certification with the DEO certificate. The customer's expecting them. And that's fine. Hold us accountable. We told you we were going to do it. Do it. And what's really tough, if you do a good installation, to not get the certification, it's tough when you do things correctly.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of pain than dealing with the sort of endemic that most contractors deal with, where it's just like, callbacks are a cost of doing business. 10%, yep, that's just normal. So that's one type of pain that people are choosing, right? Versus this other pain where you add discipline, you add process, you add technology. It's a little bit more work, but like the trade-offs of having this variable sort of anxiety that you never know when it's going to bite you in the butt versus having a little bit more security about knowing that you've been able to deliver that high standard of care to customers that you care about. You can pick which one you want.
Yeah. And it's going to start with the customer that's making the decision. So if we're talking about verified or commissioning, you got to paint the picture between a company that commissions and a company that does not. And as long as you're honest and you deliver on what you say you're going to do, and you charge for that, let the customer pick. You would be surprised the people that will pick. It's about 75% we have a value line, basic builder grade unit that they don't care about any of this. Okay, we'll get down with the low ballers. We'll get down there with them, but you don't get these other things. It's not right for you to think you do get these other things, because those things come at a cost. And if that cost is not worth it to you, that's fine. That's perfectly okay, but you don't get them. You don't get the same warranty. You have to separate yourself, and you will raise your margins, and you will raise your dollar amount of your job sold if you believe in it. It can't be one of these things that you just sell because the boss says you should, and I want this sold, and close this many because this is your quota. It doesn't work. You got to believe in doing a better job. If you believe in doing a better job, charge for it and use the MeasureQuick commissioning process. Jim gives it to you on a golden platter ad nauseum. All those charts and green, red, yellow, all of that is it's all built in. It's for $5, Mike. That's nothing when you think about the value. But you got to leverage it. And
so myself, Brian, and Joe did a webinar a couple of months ago on the Band-Aid season, which can be found on our YouTube channel, where we also tackled a lot of the problems that you were talking about earlier in this conversation. The Band-Aid season was a play on words for the busy season. And I love play on words. Now, technically, we're in the commissioning season. Maybe for contractors, for other HVAC businesses, that they were doing business as usual during the busy season, what's comfortable, and that's perfectly fine. But now there's like this window of time. If you were to give like a few pieces of advice or one piece of advice to contractors who maybe are starting to recognize that, oh yeah, this could be a problem with some of the new inverter-driven pieces of equipment that we installed, how could they, within the next couple of weeks, adopt some very easy commissioning practices where they could contact the customers and be like, hey, we're going to come out again to do commissioning, which the customer won't understand if the contractor doesn't understand it. But anyways, like something like value prop to the customer, to the homeowner, and then the process that the HVAC company would go through to have their technicians do it, and like how to justify that in a balance sheet. The fact that they are doing this maybe it's just a slight change to their existing maintenance processes, but it's a culture shift. It's a shift in their approach for why they're going out there. It's not just to show up and say, hi, buy extra services from me. It is that we're going to ensure that you don't have any problems with this piece of equipment that either we just serviced or just installed. So what would be your advice for if somebody were to try to implement some of these commissioning practices post-installation like you guys do?
So this would be a process that will be somewhat flying by the seat of their pants, to be upfront
Yep.
with you. But it typically is, but you're a smaller shop, you got 4 techs and you're trying to figure out how to keep them busy. And let's say these technicians in the real world, when they're running and gunning in the middle of summer or the middle of winter, they sell maintenance agreements. Okay. The easy phone call is, Mrs. Smith, we just installed your unit here at ABC Heating and Air. We want to make sure that since that unit's run a little bit now, we would like to come out, spend about an hour and dial that system in to make sure it's the best that it can be. Now, that's included in what you've already paid. And we'd also like to, if you're willing, to talk to you about taking care of that system, ongoing maintenance when we come out. And that's all you really need to say. What, are you going to sell me a maintenance contract? No, we're going to give you the options for you to choose. And it's perfectly fine to say no as well. So you have to have some type of, what are you going to do? We sell a lot of maintenances off of commissioning. We don't sell maintenances. But at the end of the day, we're not there to sell a maintenance. That's just something that happens.
And what about the objection of, what do you mean you didn't install it right in the first place?
No, it's installed perfectly fine. In fact, it passed a lot of our tests with our installers, but we just want to make sure now that it's dialed in. And Mrs. Smith, we don't have to do this. Remember, this is no charge for us to come out, but it's a good idea. We find that most of our customers will benefit from us dialing in the system after it's run a little bit. Just leave it out.
But what happens if you don't come out? Like a customer asking you, like, what's my risk?
It's difficult for us to give you 100% confidence that system's running at its peak performance. We would like to be sure by just double checking.
And being that it's no cost, as long as it doesn't throw off their schedule, their personal life, but there's the customer acquisition, there's the impact of the fact that now you no longer have that voice as a referral. You no longer have that voice as a testimonial, somebody who wants to come to you because you're the guy that, like, the system failed because you didn't do the job.
And we get back to that culture thing, and it's a tough one, but the right answer that I have found in us at MeasureQuick here with the guys that sell in the house is, this is an absolute game changer at the kitchen table when you're talking about how you are different from someone else. So we bring up what's happening is most contractors that give free maintenance for the first year, that's just some, God love them, some young lad coming out of trade school that's just coming up. They always put them on the brand new equipment that doesn't have any problems, to come out and fill out a checkbox on an invoice that says, it's good, Mrs. Smith, it's running great.
Do you want to buy all this stuff that you might not need?
Certainly have this. What would be best for you? Okay. At the kitchen table, we're bringing up the verified equipment operation, the VEO certificate.
ACCA.
And we're having an explanation and a conversation with the customer. This is what we do on most of our installs, and this is how we do it. And we explain the commissioning process. So you can be in California, and I can only speak to our market, but you literally can get 70% basically of what you paid for if you pass the building code. So all of our competitors that say, we don't know what MeasureQuick's talking about, they have to pass the inspection just like we do. We say, congratulations, you just started life with a very expensive piece of equipment at a C. In 5 years, is it going to be a D? We start you at an A, and we prove it with an independent certification. So for the customer that says, I don't care about any of that, then we take that away and we don't do it. But we charge for that at the time. In our end market, I don't know, it's fair to say $17,000 average replacement cost. Okay. Can we not pack in and cover the cost to do things better for a customer through commissioning? $200? Come on. If we're fixating on $200 on a $17,000 job, we've got some other problems in our organization. Because that $200 you're charging that customer is going to be one of the best things you can do for them. And it separates you. So,
and it reduces your risk. That's one of the things
risk.
That seems to be like, I don't hear anybody talking about it very much unless I've discussed it with one or two HVAC companies that are backed by private equity.
Yep.
That their whole thing is all about risk management. But generally, most decision makers in HVAC businesses, they don't really, that's not a topic that they understand. And so maybe is there a different way to relate that, like risk management, risk reduction, risk assessment, like the value of that to a business? Are you able to explain that?
The differences between large, recent private equity owned organizations and a company such as Rayo Cook that is family owned, the way we see it in our market is a venture capitalist owned large mechanical contractors. They will always have to answer to the shareholders first, the customer second. And that is a fact. So we're a smaller family owned company. We're not a small company, but not a venture capitalist owned company. We're big at the customer first and everything else will take care of itself. That's the message. And that's a very simplified thing
culture,
there.
Yeah.
But when you deal with somebody that's got 100 technicians, just do the math. The odds of getting a different, I'll say, service from that technician who has the profit and the shareholder, because that's what his boss wants out of him, at top of mind than your values, the odds of that being the case is very high. Because that's the only way that business model works. And that's true. And we compete against some decent venture capitalist-owned companies. They do an okay job, but they can't touch us on customer service and customer ratings and customer experience, because that's one slot above where they put it. We're back to that culture thing.
Your shareholders are the community members in which you live within. And so you can prioritize them because they're your customers as well.
Our shareholders are referrals. Our shareholders are generations of customers that we did their grandparents' units. Those are the people, those are our shareholders. And it's easy actually to compete against a lot of these. If you expose the difference, we have to have the want and the will to expose this difference. And again, if the customer is okay with that business model, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with anybody that works for me that exposes the difference and the customer does not choose this. I'm not okay with not exposing the difference. At least take that step. And more than 50% of the time, we're going to come out on the other end.
So, Paul, it is always such a pleasure to chat with you and to hear about your experiences in delivering such high quality work to all your customers. And hopefully some of the other MeasureQuick customers and people who are watching this can leave inspired and learn a few things from our conversation here. And we'll check in again at some point in the future.
Glad to spend some time with you, Ben. We get passionate about it, but we do see it work, and the trade does need these kind of things to propel it forward so that we're not all looked upon as some guy in a truck that's just there to fix their unit and move on to the next call.
I'm glad that people like yourself and Jim are working so hard to make this industry better.
Glad to do it.
Awesome. Until next time.